Hey, everybody, welcome to Just the News. I am Carrie Sheffield and excited for our guest today. He's Mr. Princell Hair. He's the new CEO of a news channel that I've been following for quite some time called the Black News Channel. Welcome, Princell.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.
So, Princell, walk us through, because a lot of our viewers might not know what the Black News Channel is. So, first, walk us through what it is, and then what's your vision for it?
Sure. Those things are actually in tandem, so I'll tackle that question as with one answer. As journalists, we really want to give voice to the voiceless, and with the exception of just a few times in our history, the Black community has largely been unheard or ignored. And really, our job at the Black News Channel is to be the conduit that brings those voices to the forefront and really amplifies our stories in our communities through our storytelling. We want to be an indispensable source of news and information for the Black community. And, especially given with what's been happening over the course of the last several months, I think the Black News Channel in that perspective is needed now more than ever.
So, in terms of the news network, you guys launched in February of 2020. It had been a long journey. It was very much a product of love for JC Watts, who is now has been the interim CEO for Black News Channel. What is JC Watts's role going to be moving forward? Is he going to be shifting more to content?
Well, Chairman Watts has always been focused on the content of the network. I'll be running the day-to-day business of the network, and Chairman Watts will really kind of revert back to his chairman role, and that is really just making sure that we're adhering to the brand promise and the mission of BNC and helping us with governance and helping us in Washington, which is a place that he is very familiar with.
Sure, absolutely. Well, that's where we're based, so hopefully we'll have him on soon.
Great.
In terms of the strategy, what obviously you don't want to give away the farm here in this interview, but what's the future? What are the metrics you're looking at a year out, 5 years out, 10 years out for BNC?
Right, that's a good question. We're really looking to increase our distribution. That is one of the first priorities for me and the team. We want to expand our footprint across all of the markets in the United States and be on every cable system and satellite system, every OTT platform that we can be on. So that's the first priority is really just expand our distribution, our reach. And simultaneously, we want to continue to improve our content. The idea of being able to tell stories about the Black community, within the Black community and by Black journalists requires a dedication of resources. And we are in the process now of really galvanizing those resources to deliver better content to our audience.
And in terms of the timing, as mentioned, your Black News Channel launched in February 2020. We're now in the middle of a pandemic, as well as considerable tension on race issues. What has that been like, that journey as the Black News Channel, in terms of, are you seeing explosive growth? Is there a lot more interest since there's this broader conversation happening in this country about race?
Should I tell you, if you were planning to launch a television news network, you probably wouldn't do it in the middle of a pandemic or at the beginning of a pandemic. But the network has really thrived during these very difficult times. We've had, major stories over the course of the past 6 months that have really disproportionately affected the Black community. The pandemic obviously is one of them, where more Blacks are getting sicker. The economic impact that the pandemic has caused, the civil unrest and police reform, calls for police reforms. I mean, those are all things that have really impacted the Black community. And then you look ahead to the fall, where the kids have to go back to school or should be going back to school, and there's some uncertainty as to whether that's going to happen. So for us, it's been a real challenge to try and cover all of these stories in a meaningful way. The audience has found us, and we hear from our audience. We interact with our audience, much like most networks do,
And
and
what kind of metrics have you gotten? What's your viewership currently?
it's still too early to tell from a Nielsen standpoint or what have you. So we don't have those metrics just yet, but I suspect that sometime within the next few months we'll have a better sense of who's watching, where they're watching, how many people are watching.
And so
Uh,
you're on cable currently. Walk us through, where are you currently?
So currently, our cable footprint is Spectrum. We are on Comcast, Xfinity. We are working on some exciting new cable deals, which I can't really talk about, but there will be some information that comes out over the course of the next few months. We've launched BNC 24/7, which is our that's our streaming service, or our OTT service, and we're on Roku and Pluto and other OTT platforms.
Hmm. And in terms of this story that's, kind of the value added, or what is the specific niche? What do you think is not being told by the Black press currently, the Black news channel is going to do that isn't currently being told? I mean, there's considerable interest in terms of corporate funding, investment for some other Black owned news organizations like Blavity, Black Enterprise, BET. I mean, there's a lot of offerings right now. So what is the Black news channel's value prop?
Sure. Well, look, we are trying to get into the communities and tell the stories that we want to hear. The Black experience is a varied, very different experience depending on who you are, what part of the country you're from, what part of the world you're from. I grew up in South Florida, and Haitian Americans have very different priorities than Africans, who have very different priorities than Southern Blacks. And our goal is to really tell all of those stories through all of those varied lenses, with all of those different voices.
Well, it's interesting you use the phrase the Black experience. I was recently speaking about this with an African American friend of mine, and he said there's a lot of information out there to say that there's only one way to be Black. Is that kind of what you're getting at? That you're saying the Black News Channel is showing some other ways that you can be Black that aren't necessarily in the current media offerings?
Absolutely, 100%. It's not a one size fit all. The Black experience is very different if you grew up in, South Florida, or if you grew up in New York, or if you grew up in Chicago, South side of Chicago, if you grew up in LA, if you grew up in Africa. The Black experience is very different. And our goal is really to try and capture as many of those experiences from as many different perspectives as we can.
And in terms of one thing that Chairman J.C. Watts had previously shared with me was that from his perspective, he obviously was a former Republican congressman, that this is not a Republican channel, but his phrase was that this was really a network about kind of instilling kind of traditional values, or values that he said that your grandma had. That a lot of those values haven't been adequately portrayed in his view. Do you share that perspective in terms of passing the baton?
Sure. Look, we have conditioned our audiences to look at things from the left or the right. The cable news world has done that, and my goal here is that we tell the truth, and we tell the truth from as many different sides as we can, and the facts are the facts. And we really leave it up to our audience and trust our audience to make up their own minds and about particular stories of the day.
And in terms of the again, sort of the value prop of what's not being told, what do you think that the phrase in news is that it bleeds, it leads? There's a lot happening with the country being very polarized, especially on issues of race. What's your position on Black News Channel, and how you would your perspective on what's happening with polarization, and do you see yourself as a force for maybe helping to alleviate some of that?
Right. Well, look, there are a lot of people in the Black community who are doing a lot of great things, and we tend to focus on, we being the mainstream media, really tends to focus on how bad things are. And I think, for the Black News Channel, we want to also tell those stories about people who are doing great things in their communities. They are inspirational stories, so that people don't forget that there are a lot of positive things happening in the Black community. And the fact of the matter is there really wasn't an outlet for that before, but we have an outlet for that now. And it's our goal and our job really, at the Black News Channel, to bring those stories to light.
And in terms of a lot of the arguments we're seeing from, for example, the 1619 Project and a lot of calls to dismantle certain figures within history or tear down statues, what is Black News Channel's position on sort of historical lenses and how you plan to present that?
Well, look, we plan to present, and we have presented those stories in as factually accurate a way as we can, and that's what we're going to continue to do. We are not going to, our goal is not to tell the viewer what to think. Our goal is really to just present the facts, and then allow the viewer to really make up their mind about their own positions on these particular issues.
And so, do you feel like in the Black press that's currently lacking? Do you think a lot of these outlets have more of an agenda or are sort of telling their audience what to think?
Well, look, I think that, as I said before, we've conditioned the audience. Cable news has really conditioned the audience to really kind of reflect particular points of view and particular opinions. Other publications and newspapers have done that as well. That's not what our mission is, and that's not what we are trying to do.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, Princell Hair, we appreciate your time. You have an impressive resume everywhere from CNN to NBC News. We will be watching.
Thank you very much, and please do stay in touch.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, take care.